Very good afternoon, respected seniors and my dear friends. I am Dr. Aarti Manjari, and today's my topic is post-menopausal bleeding and complaints. So coming to the definition, it is the spontaneous uterine bleeding that occurs after more than a year after a woman's last period, that is the menopause. It can be in the form of spotting or it can be heavy bleeding. Breakthrough bleeding is the term used in patients using HRT. The incidence of postmenopausal bleeding decreases with age, but the probability of endometrial cancer increases with age. It occurs 4 to 11% in total postmenopausal women. 1 to 14% of postmenopausal bleeding will be secondary to endometrial cancer. Postmenopausal bleeding is the presenting sign in more than 90% of cases of CA endometrium. Postmenopausal bleeding plus obesity is present in 18%. With diabetes, it is 21%, and with both obesity and diabetes, it is 29%. The risk factors are nulliparity, early menarche, late menopause. The risk of cancer is less in younger age group and more in older age group. Peak age group is between 60 to 64 years. Other risk factors are the obesity, diabetes, HRT, PCOD, family history, and history of breast cancer and ovarian cancer in the past. Etiology consists of vaginal atrophy, HRT, endometrial hyperplasia, uterine polyps, fibroids, adenomyosis. Then malignancies of the endometrium, cervix, vagina, fallopian tubes, and the ovary. Hereditary non-polyposis of colonic cancer, that is the Lynch syndrome. About 42 to 60% of likelihood of CA endometrium in these patients. Then the other causes are cervicitis, trauma, assault, infections including the UTI, clotting problems, and thyroid disorders. So here you can see that the atrophic endometritis and vaginitis accounts to 60 to 80% of the cases of postmenopausal bleeding. Exogenous estrogens, that is the HRT, 15 to 25%, endometrial carcinoma at 10%, endometrial hyperplasia in 5 to 10%, and endometrial and cervical polyps in 2 to 12%. Coming to the diagnosis of postmenopausal bleeding. Whenever a patient of postmenopausal bleeding comes to you, early diagnosis is very important because early diagnosis causes only 3% of all the cancer-related deaths. First of all, a detailed history of the patient should be taken, right from the bleeding pattern, whether she has any discharge, pain, and history of past history, family history, and history of any medication should be asked. Examination should include not only the examination of the vulva, vagina, and the cervix, but also the urethra and the anus. Blood investigations include all investigations, all routine investigations, and thyroid profile and coagulation profile should be included. Pap smear should be taken and colposcopy when indicated. Transvaginal sonography. ACOG recommends TVS for initial evaluation in low-risk women. An endometrial thickness of less than or equal to 4 mm has a negative predictive value of more than 99% for CA endometrium. The endometrial echo-complex is measured as a double layer in mid-sagittal view. The morphologic features should be uniform and any irregularities warrant other investigations. The Society of Radiologists of Ultrasound recommend cutoff of 5 mm of the endometrial echo-complex. TVS is less sensitive for detection of type 2 CA endometrium. A cohort study demonstrated that 17% of patients with PND and type 2 CA endometrium had an endometrial echo-complex of less than 4 mm. If endometrial fluid is seen on TVS, then it should be subtracted from the total endometrial thickness. If it is sonolucent and the endometrial thickness is less than 4 mm, then the pathology must be benign. If it is echogenic and the endometrial echo-complex is more than 4 mm, then risk of malignancy should be suspected. The TVS can also be used to diagnose leiomyoma and other adnexal pathologies. These are the ACOG 2018 guidelines on the transvaginal ultrasonography and endometrial evaluation. Transvaginal ultrasound is appropriate for initial evaluation of postmenopausal bleeding if the endometrial thickness is less than 4 mm. Failure to adequately identify a thin, distinct endometrial echo in a postmenopausal woman with bleeding demands sonohistography, office hysteroscopy, or the endometrial sampling. If blind sampling is inconclusive, further testing such as the hysteroscopy with dilatation and curettage is worked. Endometrial thickness, if more than 4 mm in a postmenopausal patient without bleeding, need not routinely trigger evaluation. These are some of the TBS pictures. It is the normal endometrium on day 11 of the menstrual cycle. This is the atrophic endometrium. This is the endometrial hyperplasia. You can see the clear demarcation between the endometrium and the myometrium. This is the endometrial polyp, and this is the endometrial carcinoma. Here the demarcating line is missing. So endometrial sampling is the first line of screening in high-risk women. Its sensitivity is 84% and specificity is 99%. Office-based endometrial sampling with suction catheter or Pepili Vabra aspirator or Explora catheter can be done. Failure rate is 16% due to insufficient sampling, and focal pathologies can also be missed. Diagnostic accuracy of endometrial sampling correlates positively with the amount of tissue that is obtained. Insufficient sample and endometrial thickness of more than 5 mm should be investigated further. This is the Vabra disposable set for endometrial biopsy. It is a flexible straight catheter with blunt point, side ports, and a test tube with a cap. So what are the findings on USG that warrant endometrial sampling? A thickened endometrium more than 4 mm. If it is diffuse or there is focally increased echogenicity or heterogenicity, then inability to visualize the endometrium adequately, and patients with persistent or recurrent bleeding should also undergo endometrial sampling. Hysteroscopy and directed biopsy is a gold standard with sensitivity of 98% and specificity of 95%. It provides a good diagnostic accuracy for polyps and submucous leiomyoma. It should be done in patients with insufficient sampling or patients with persistent bleeding. For carcinoma, curettage and directed biopsy is a must along with the visualization. These are the hysteroscopic picture. It is the normal endometrium. This is the atrophic endometrium, endometrial polyp. This is the simple cystic hyperplasia. This is the endometrial carcinoma. Dilatation and curettage is done in low resource setting. Sensitivity for CA endometrium is more than 90%, and fractional curettage should be performed in cases of postmenopausal bleeding. Others are the saline infusion sonography. It is the easy, safe and cost-effective method. It is useful when the diagnosis remains unclear after biopsy. Evidence of focal lesion on TBS. Bleeding persists despite a normal initial workup, and the patient has contraindication to hysteroscopy or DNC. Transvaginal Doppler ultrasound, 3D ultrasound, endometrial texture and margin analysis are the other ultrasound measures. Then CT scan and MRI, insufficient evidence is there and hence not routinely recommended for diagnosis, but they are useful only in invasive carcinomas. PET scan is used in lymph node mapping, staging and to see the recurrence. The new biomarkers are the phosphatase and tensin homolog (PTEN), beta cell lymphoma 2 and the beta cell lymphoma 2 like proteins. So this is the initial workup where the patient of PMB comes. First history and physical examination, pap smear and STD testing should be performed. Then perform an endometrial biopsy of the TBS. If the patient is high risk, endometrial biopsy. If she is low risk, then transvaginal ultrasound. If the endometrial biopsy shows abnormal results, then refer for treatment. If it is normal and the bleeding continues, then perform transvaginal ultrasonography, saline infusion sonography or the hysteroscopy. If the bleeding stops, then just observe the patient. If on TBS, endometrial thickness is less than 4 mm, then it is atrophic endometrium. If it is more than 4 mm, perform saline infusion sonography, biopsy or hysteroscopy with biopsy. If any uterine pathology is there, then refer for treatment. PMB and HRT. So PMB is common in patients taking HRT, but if bleeding is persistent for more than 6 months, further evaluation should be done. A Cochrane meta-analysis found that the relative risk for C. endometrium using unopposed estrogen is 5 times to those of non-users and is not recommended for use in a woman with a uterus. Users of HRT, that is the combined regimen, risk of carcinoma is 1% and in non-users the risk of carcinoma is 6 to 12%. Women on sequential HRT tend to have a thicker endometrium, thus a higher threshold on ultrasound should be used. Stop the HRT for 6 weeks and review patient after ruling out the compliance of the patient. Postmenopausal bleeding and tamoxifen. The risk of carcinoma in tamoxifen users is 3 to 6 fold higher. Risk increases with both the use of higher doses and increasing duration of the treatment. Use beyond 5 years increases the risk by at least 4-fold. Endometrial cancer in long-term users of tamoxifen has a poorer prognosis due to less favorable histology and higher stage. TVS is poor for diagnosis of these patients because of the distorted endometrial architecture associated with long-term tamoxifen use. Hysteroscopy with biopsy should be used in these patients. Aromatase inhibitors such as letrozole, anastrozole, exemestane are given postmenopausal women with estrogen-dependent breast cancer. Coming to the treatment, first treatment of anemia should be done. Then treatment of vaginal atrophy includes moisturizer, lubricants, vaginal estrogen creams, suppositories, rings, estrogen tablets and systemic HRT in the form which may be combined or progesterone only pills, DMPA injections or implants or the LNG intrauterine device. Polyps and fibroids should be removed because 5% of polyps may turn out to be malignant. Medical treatment for cervicitis, cervical and other cancers, the treatment is based on the staging and doxycycline for endometritis. Postmenopausal bleeding and endometrial hyperplasia. There are 2 ways of classifying endometrial hyperplasia. The WHO schema 1994 is based on the nuclear atypia and the glandular complexity. It divides the endometrial hyperplasia into hyperplasia without atypia, with atypia, simple, complex, simple with atypia, complex with atypia. New revised 2014 WHO schema divides the endometrial hyperplasia into only 2 parts, that is the hyperplasia without atypia and atypical hyperplasia. Endometrial intraepithelial neoplasia diagnostic schema, that is the EIN, divides it into benign, pre-malignant and the malignant. So what is the treatment of endometrial hyperplasia? According to RCOG guidelines, patients without atypia progress to endometrial cancer in less than 5% over 20 years and many of them regress spontaneously. So just observe the patients. 74% of patients will regress. If they fail to regress, then progesterone therapy should be given. 89 to 96% of patients will regress. EIN or the atypical hyperplasia require total hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy and laparoscopic method is preferred. Medical management should be given in patients declining surgery or who desire fertility. Then follow-up should be done with endometrial biopsy, 6 monthly in cases without atypia, 3 monthly in cases with atypia until 2 consecutive samples are negative. Hysterectomy in cases without atypia. So when there is no atypia, then what are the RCOG indications for hysterectomy? If there is progression to atypia, no histological regression despite 12 months of treatment of progesterone, relapse of endometrial hyperplasia, persistence of the bleeding and non-compliance with the patient. Endometrial ablation is not recommended. What is the fertility sparing treatment in atypical hyperplasia? It is the medical management. The LNG intrauterine system is the first line and the oral progestogens, the continuous progestogen should be given for at least 6 months. Who are the candidates for this fertility sparing treatment? If the patient strongly desires for fertility, patient understands the fact that the data on the outcomes are limited. If the patient has well differentiated C endometrium grade 1 with no myometrial invasion, no extrauterine involvement and no contraindication to medical treatment. Multidisciplinary approach and a plan for management for such patients should be done. Regression of the endometrial hyperplasia should be achieved in these patients and ART should be done. We will get a 26.3% of live birth rate. Postmenopausal bleeding and endometrial carcinoma. There are two types of endometrial carcinoma. First is the secondary to unopposed estrogen hyperplasia with endometrioid appearance on the HPA can be seen. It occurs in 90% of these patients and it is seen in younger group. Type 2 is the serous or the clear cell origin and not related to estrogen exposure. It has a poor prognosis and it occurs in 10% of the cases. Treatment includes comprehensive staging by total hysterectomy, bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy, pelvic and para-aortic lymphadenectomy, and pelvic washing should be taken for cytology. Radio and chemotherapy should be given according to the stage of the malignancy. Recent advances in the management of endometrial carcinoma. Sentinel lymph node mapping is done because the complete lymphadenectomy causes more morbidity. The FIRES, that is the fluorescence imaging for robotic endometrial sentinel biopsy, is done nowadays. Tumor is tested using immunohistochemistry to evaluate MMR protein levels for the Lynch syndrome. Recent evidences show link between the BRCA1 gene and subsequent development of serous endometrial carcinoma. The newer treatments are anti-angiogenic drugs, that is bevacizumab, recombinant monoclonal antibody against the VGE, that is the thalidomide and the sorafenib, endometrial growth factor inhibitors, HER2 inhibitors and the immunotherapy. Prognosis. Overall, the prognosis of postmenopausal bleeding is favorable as most etiologies are benign. 70% of endometrial carcinoma are diagnosed at stage 1 with associated 90% survival rate at 5 years. Carcinoma cases diagnosed with extrauterine disease account for more than half of the cancer-related deaths and have survival rates as low as 5 to 15%. So PME can be prevented. Treat the endometrial and vaginal atrophy, give HRT whenever possible. The regular screening should be done and maintain a healthy diet and exercise regularly. These are the recommendations for future research. The role of biomarkers in the diagnosis of endometrial hyperplasia, effect of weight loss in the progression of the disease, optimal duration of oral or local progesterone in the treatment, then evaluation of endometrial surveillance regimens, and the role of LNG-IUS in HRT associated endometrial hyperplasia. Thank you so much.